What's up, everybody? Welcome back for another week of UFL Talks. It's been a long season, but hey, we keep moving. Glad to have you all back with us, of course. Should be an awesome week of the UFL ahead. We're going to get at it with our usual pregame. Going to dive into last week, take a look at what we got ahead, and see what the week has in store for us. Right off the rip, I'll start with some good news for the league that I think everyone should be optimistic about. Uh, the league has announced its summer player showcases, which, as I would assume, that's a pretty good look, especially if the league is looking ahead to next season. Pretty good idea, especially something to look ahead of for those players that might want their second chance as well, because you never know who could come out of the showcases. Some of the biggest stars come out of the showcases. Um, and with the league already announcing these, that's a really good look. And they're doing them in the cities where the player or where we have teams already. Great look as well. Get some of that local talent. Great storylines. If someone does come out of that showcase, but regardless, it's a good look because we're looking to the future. We don't know what 27 brings, but in 27 we'll know. At least the league is looking to it, and that's a good step. Otherwise, just a reminder about the United Bowl coming up June 13th. Really been a push to the playoffs these last few weeks, and that's really what's in store for the league ahead. So we'll just have to wait and see who gets there because that has remained an elusive question. Um, but kind of the most interesting story that's kind of arisen this week has actually surrounded the future Oklahoma City foot UFL team. So, from what we're hearing, and this is early and nothing's been substantiated, and everything's been pretty quiet lately, Echo Investments, which is the group that owns the soccer team for Oklahoma City that will be playing in the same stadium, is hoping to have some form of ownership with the UFL team. So we're not sure exactly what that'll look like, but that is a good step for the league because once we have actual ownership for our teams, not only does the league, take another step to resembling the NFL, but also it does relieve some of those costs and it does open the door for more of that hometown ownership to provide that local feel instead of that headquarters approach, as most startups have. But whether it's true or not, we'll have to see. But if this does happen, I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see expansion teams coming up in places like this as well, where places are really trying to grow that portfolio, especially when it comes to their sports attractions, things like that, because that does draw people into the cities, and especially you get more visitors, especially like on our Friday night football games. So pretty good, pretty exciting. I think the league's got a lot to look ahead to, but it's been a relatively quiet week so far. So let's look into what happened in week 7 for us. So our Friday night football game was the Aviators versus the Battlehawks. Didn't go to the Aviators' way. Most people did not think it would anyway. When you look at time of possession, sitting at about 30 minutes each, so it was pretty well distributed. Yardage is really where we started to see the difference, and this was the first game of Luis Perez starting for the Battlehawks, which was exciting. Then we had, when it comes down to your plays, yardage, it was relatively even. The issue, of course, that comes in uh, really was a lack of finishing drives, and that's something the Battlehawks were really able to do. And I compliment the quarterback play for that because that really contributes to their team and their effectiveness, especially when it comes down into the red zone. McClendon threw for 2, so that's pretty good. 1 interception, that's pretty standard for him as it goes. Pretty much standard for every quarterback across the league as it's been lately. Then we've got interception for both. Not great. Actually, surprisingly, McClendon did perform a little bit perform better. But Perez brings that veteran presence, and I believe it had an effect on the offense. But the difference really came down to the rushing game. McClendon, again, second highest rusher, something they've been trying to fix this whole season, but it's just been so inconsistent. Then you look at the Battlehawks. You've got Howard really filling that number one back role, and then James kind of filling in. So hopefully, there's been a lot of movement lately in that rushing room or the running back room for the Battlehawks. So we'll see what the future brings for them. But across both these teams, it's kind of inconsistent, and it's really a pass-heavy attack. That's what you see here. Martin, Wells, Chisholm doing decent yardage. Butler, of course, you're gonna feel his presence. He's someone that makes you adjust your game plan, and then from that point, what are you gonna do? Then we got Pearson, Neville, pretty good performance, and then looking at defense, Fields, one of the better defensive performers out of the league so far. 9 tackles. Then you look at Mosley, 7 tackles. He also did well so really good performance defensively out of both these teams. Then we look at kind of the recap, which it might show us, it may not. Regardless, we'll take a step back and look at our next game, which was our Saturday starter. If it ever loads. But the main story here is that we had a very, very shocking week. I think there is a lot of expectations that were not met, and I think there leaves a lot to be desired, especially as we go into these later weeks of the season. And especially, Perez, that was his first week, and it's week 7. So there's a lot of changes that could be on the way. So unfortunately, not everything. And then when we look at our next game, Kings versus Defenders, this was our first shocker of the week. So I don't think anyone really had the Kings expected to win here. And off the new quarterback play, it's only been 2 or 3 weeks. They did have some, they did get a few wins earlier this season. But now they're sitting in this 3-4 status where they're really potentially could make a push for the playoffs, and it really came down to just an all-around dominance. So when you look at yardage, 414 yards out of the Defenders, so almost 90 more yards than Louisville, so almost an entire field they basically climbed. But what happened there? Oh, well, DC couldn't finish any drives, and Louisville just happened to get lucky on, especially when it came down towards the end of the game. And defense, it was like they couldn't get anything going, the Defenders. But they got so many yards, and it was just like, what is going on here? And it was all comes down to these 4 turnovers. You cannot win a game with that many turnovers. But the most exciting thing for the Kings, they got 145 rushing yards. So one of their better performances all season, and ultimately something to really look forward to if you are a Louisville fan. Rodgers really stepping into that role as the quarterback. 114 QBR, pretty good performance. 2 tuds thrown, impressive. 201 yards, of course. And then Tamu, 353 yards, 2 tuds. So an amazing performance, but then he also goes around and throws 2 interceptions. So those 2 interceptions are pretty standard for what we've seen across this season for the Defenders, but ultimately kind of unfortunate what's occurred last week for them, because those 400 yards. So basically, all of your drives, you've lost the ball each time, and you only put up 13 points. So kind of an embarrassing performance. And he did score 2 touchdowns. Then when we look at our rushing attack, that's where Wheeler is really stepping up. He's really been filling that number 1 running back role. And then Robinson also filling in, got some good yards. Jackson, 48, decent. You'd like to see more out of that, but not the best. Robinson did get himself 1 touchdown, so that was a good performance, and I believe the defense got one as well. Then when we look at Defenders, Tamu's rushing, third largest, or your third highest rusher, and he's only got 11 yards. So not exactly what you want to see, but ultimately there is room for improvement there. Then when you're looking at the Kings receiving, Winstead really stepping into that number 1 role. Lucky kind of filling in where he can. Black, of course. Been consistently, I'd say, the number 2. Powell leading the way for the Defenders. Generally has been all season. Scott also been a crucial asset to them, and then Antonio really stepped up this game. They both got each a touchdown, but it wasn't enough, and it really came down to how they were able to finish their drives because the only time they were able to tuck it in was those two tuds. Powell, though, really good performance, 109 yards off four catches, so pretty impressive. Um, then when we look at defense, overall, really impressive performance out of the Kings. And the question will be, how do they do? Because we're going to have this direct rematch going into next week. So it's a question, what is exactly going to happen? Who's going to win that game? Because, the Kings do well off of a rematch, but the defenders also, that's only their second loss of the seasons. And they came back, they won 5 games after their last loss, which was the first week of the season. So I'm sure they'll be coming back with quite the performance. And I think if you are a Defenders fan, do not worry. It was a tough week. Of course, those turnovers are going to have that effect, but ultimately, I feel this week probably will not go the same. But it's quite possible that the Kings did just kind of figure out their formula and are able to kind of take advantage of that. And then our Saturday seconds was the Renegades versus the Stallions, which really came down to be quite an exciting game. And I think a lot of people really thought that the game would not go the way that it would. And just the score alone does not tell the story of this game. And really, there was a lot riding on both of these teams. The Renegades had tough few weeks. The Stallions really trying to fight for their chance. They have the legacy of the team. They are pretty much the championship standard. And as they performed, it really was not the case. So there was a lot to look forward to, of course, for both of these teams. Offensively, they had decent performances, but there were a lot to be desired still from both of these. DTR's really done well. Reed has really cleaned up a little bit, but it seems like his confidence has been dinged as the starting quarterback, and that is unfortunate, of course. But the question remains: what does the future hold for these teams? Because we've got a 3-way tie right now for that 4 spot into the playoffs, which is the Renegades, Stallions, and Kings. And depending on how this week shakes out, next week shakes out, we could still have a 3-way tie for that 4 spot, and it's going to come down to the performance versus each other. And I think this game right here may end up deciding the playoff position. So when you look at kind of how the stats went, really Dallas dominated the game, but they just could not get the points they needed to win this game. 74 plays compared to 46, really controlled 3/4 of the game, and yet the Stallions still came away on top. And that's really a testament to DTR's offense. He's really out there scoring, and he was brought in to do just that. They needed a competent quarterback play, and they've gotten it out of him. But the rushing attack was almost the most impressive part of the Renegades' performance, and I think what gives me the most hope. 130 yards, that's not what you normally see out of the Renegades, and I think there's a lot to build on there, especially if you can clean up that passing attack, and there was no turnover, so really it was just, the offensive scheme was kind of getting stopped rather than the players were misperforming. And then we had a turnover, of course, out of the Stallions. That does happen, but they still were able to hold on to get the win. So there's not a lot, you can't be too disappointed there. DTR is still new in the offense. 1 interception, not terrible. You got the win. Reed, though, threw a lot of passes. So he did miss some. So how much of that is his fault? Is that a receiver misconnection? What is the problem there? The questions do remain because that was the strength of their offense. They won the first 3 weeks, and then it seems like maybe there was a miscommunication or that connection was broken, and they've lost every game since. So they really kind of were not expected to have as strong of a collapse as they have, but maybe they're going to turn things around in week 8. So looking at our rushing attack, Day Hunter really been the number 1 this season. 43 yards, not terrible. Merriweather, though, I think is who we're going to start seeing more of. 2 tuds with 38 yards. It seems like he's more of that goal line back, so we'll like to see what he can contribute moving forward. Rushing attack on the Stallions, basically non-existent at this point. McFarland's been consistent, but Davis Pierce Price may be the future, we'll see what Coach McCarron decides to do there. Then when it comes to receiving, McKinn's really been that number one receiver all season with between both quarterbacks. Really stepped in that position, scoring tuds. He's getting these catches when they matter, and someone I think DTR can rely on. Looking at the Renegades, we got Ward 4 for 35, Merriweather for 33. Really good performance out of Merriweather. Stoops. So what you notice here is we don't see any of the Vaughn's 1 for 6, so he's probably getting doubled. And when you take away Reed's favorite receiver, you basically take away the passing offense. And if that's what people figured out and the reason they've lost 4 games, when was the adjustment going to happen? We passed the midseason mark, and yet there's still not been an adjustment. So the questions do remain exactly, what are we going to see out of the Renegades moving forward? There are a lot of questions. When you go into the game, put up no points in the third quarter, only a few field goals in the beginning, and it's just like, you got to have a more prolific attack, and so far they've not had that. The questions are going to be, especially if they lose this week, are you just going to lose out the rest of the season? And then the questions are going to be, is Coach Neuheisel coming back? Because at this point, you can't be laying up, a complete goose egg on the second half of the season. That's a poor performance, and ultimately the performance is affecting attendance, and it really hurts, especially when it comes to Dallas, because their attendance has been relatively lacking. And as it stands right now, they're one of the weaker markets, and when the team is doing poor, it's really just not good for the team. And of course, where I think there is something to be I guess optimistic about is that the season's not over for them yet. They control their future right now. If they can win out, they're into the playoffs. If they can win this week, they're into the playoffs. But looking back at week 7 and our final game, our Sunday showdown, that was the Storm versus the Gamblers, and a game that really, I think, surprised a lot of people. When you look at the score, no one expected it to be this close. I think most people thought the Gamblers were going to put up their regular 2-5 performance, but they were putting up a 5-2 performance on Sunday, and it was really a good game to watch. You look at time of possession, relatively the same, but you look at the Gamblers, 415 yards. That's almost more yards than they had in the first half of the season. So there's a lot to be happy with how that performance, but ultimately, you getting that many yards, why are you not scoring as many? You should have blown out the Storm. They only had 185 yards, but the thing is every time they got the ball, they scored. Whereas the Gamblers, not quite the case. When you look at pass yards, 317. Decker's really doing well. Plummer, not bad, 130. Like to see more in the future. But where the Gamblers really lost this game came to the turnovers. That costs you every single time. Every single game this season, they turn the ball over and they lose the damn game. So when you look at Plummer, 152 yards, 2 tuds, really got his job done. Strength, I think he has a very strong case for MVP, and if anything, he may be, right now I see it, you got Tom, who's been the front runner for probably most of the season, and he had a good performance last week, don't get me wrong. Plummer's got to be your number 2. I don't know how anybody else has him anywhere lower, and I think he's got a strong case to even be number 1. And then I'd say your third MVP, probably going to be, DTR is in the top 5, I'd say, but probably number 3, I would say, I'm not quite sure, actually. I'd say right now, the power rankings for MVP are still being formed. I don't want to give up too much. But you look at Decker's, 268 yards, 1 interception, kind of a poor performance. So unfortunate there, of course. But Decker's has really been that quarterback one. He is the one that is leading the offense and ultimately will be the one leading the offense moving forward. And then you look at Plum Lee coming in, really is going to be the backup moving forward. It seems like Tali is done for the season. But ultimately, there are hopes for this team. They could tighten it up these last 3 weeks and really shock the league and make a push for the playoffs. If they win out, they might make it. Looking at the rushing attack, this is where the Storm has really suffered. Only 25 yards. That's your leading rusher. If you're heading into playoff football, you need a prolific rushing attack. All the other teams leading the league right now, they got a good rushing or decent rushing attack. Storm have been decent, but it's been inconsistent. So maybe the Gamblers just had the game of the season. I don't know, but there is a lot of questions there. Then you look at our rushing attack, Major, not exactly been the number one back, but has been consistently in that rotation, taking a lot of snaps. Decker's, though, getting the rushing touchdown. You love to see that, though you don't want to see him being your third highest rusher. So there is some hope here for the team, especially if they can figure out. I think Yarns and Major, if you get a consistent rotation between those two, I think you can be really prolific. And I think, there's hope for the Gamblers, but if they can't win this week, it might be over for them. But really where it comes down to is Badger. Great performance, has been a consistent top performer across the league all season. And especially when we look at not only what he performs for the team, but also his connection with the quarterback. He's really become Plummer's safety blanket. Those 2 tuds off 9 targets, pretty good performance. Really only had 4 receptions, 75 yards. Good, really good job. And then you look at they move the ball around well. Camper, Hambler in those 20-yard range. But when it comes to the Gamblers, this is where there were some shocks because Jonte Kirkland, kind of the biggest name and got some of the smaller yards. Maybe that's because he was getting more of the coverage, which opened up some of these other receivers. But Moreno Cropper, probably, if he can put up a performance like this again, he really might step into that wide receiver 1 role. And I think with him, White, and Kirkland and Hall, there's no shortage of good receivers on this team. They just got to get the quarterback that can throw it to them, and lately they've been injured. But I think there's a lot to look forward to, especially for the Gamblers. Storm, we'll see what happens this week, but, all you got to do is win and you're in the playoffs. So really you should be preparing for what that's going to bring to your team, because ultimately you can expect probably going to be tough on the team, but what I'm more concerned about is the fact that they put up a goose egg in the third quarter, whereas Houston was able to at least put up points every single quarter. If the Storm want to go deep in the playoffs, they really need to be playing playoff football. What does that mean? What does playoff football mean? Well, they need to be out there consistently moving the ball. They need to be controlling the time of possession. They need to be on top of the game as to the point so much that they can actually achieve not only a win in these tough games, because it's going to be hard. These people aren't going to give up. And ultimately, I think across the league, you look at who we know. So who wins in their end. So we got Battlehawks, all of our 5-2 teams basically. But we could see some movement easily. And I do have some concerns just off kind of the last week's performance. And looking at Houston, I think it was really consistency. You not only if you don't have those turnovers, you're going to win, but the fact that this happened in week 8 and hasn't been consistent throughout the season has almost cost you your whole season, because you are a good team. You have the talent, and yet it's taken you 8 weeks to put it all together. And I understand injuries happen, of course, but, this is the premier spring football league. So if you want to win in this league, you got to be able to compete. And it's not been the case lately. Then looking at the Aviators, big problem for them. They really can't finish drives. McClendon is decent performance, and ultimately I wonder, could they have had a chance against the Battlehawks? I think they could have, but it just really started to pull away. And that happens when the Battlehawks play at home. They've got 19,000, 20,000 fans in there, which is more than every other team has in their stadium every single week. So the Battlehawks are really that anchor, for attendance, and that has an impact on the game. And I think the Aviators, they're a good team, but they're sitting at the bottom right now. And unless they have a good week this week, they're going to go even further. And I don't know if it's a coaching issue, because, you really have 2 head coaches with Ginn and Haley. But so far, it's, they can't finish drives, and it's cost them their season so far. Then we look at Birmingham. Really, I think they have a defensive issue. You know, with how the Renegades performed, you know, they probably should have not even scored as many points as they did. But you know, the Stallions have almost completely turned around their team in the middle of the season. So I am impressed with their progress so far. Then when we look at Dallas, defense is a problem for them. You know, and not only is the passing attack a problem, that one we've known about. You know, you take away Vaughns, they basically can't score a point. And ultimately, you know, if that whole offense rides on just that connection, no wonder they've lost 4 games in a row because they need to have a more dynamic offense than that if they want to be competitive. But their defense also isn't keeping them in these games either and giving them a shot to win these games. You know, it was close against the Stallions, but really, you know, that defense seeming like anyone can score any amount of points they want. So I guess we'll see what occurs for that. And then when we look at the Battlehawks, their rushing attack, if they can strengthen that, expect to see them in the championship. So far, it's been a little weak. It looked good last week, but ultimately with Perez coming in, you got the Spring King at quarterback. You've got consistency now, focusing on that rushing attack, and you really might be a championship contender. Then we look at Louisville. Great performance last week, super inconsistent. So tough for tough for competitive each week game planning against them because you never know what team you're going to get. You could get absolute dog water or you could get championship talent. And really, right now, they're fighting for their playoff hopes. And they win this week, they're still in that race. So see what the week brings. Looking at Orlando, defensive issue. The fact that the Gamblers got 23 points on them and it was this close means that there are issues on that defensive side because every single game they played, it's been close. Don't get me wrong, they're all pretty much one-score games. So are there issues there? Is it a defensive issue? Is it an offensive issue? Right now, I'm starting to think it is a defensive issue. Then when it comes to DC, you can't have a defensive performance like that. That's absolutely pitiful. You know, you're the defending champs. You're hosting the United Bowl, and yet you're gonna come out and perform like that in Week 8. What are we doing here? You know, those are questions. That was a Week 1 performance, and unfortunately, I thought we had passed that. But there's a lot of hope there because, as I said, after their last loss, they won 4 in a row. So there is some hope of course, for the defenders. Looking at our bad beats of the week, I gotta say, worst one really is that Louisville plus 10.5. Or I guess that's the best beat of the week. The worst would have been DC minus 10. Then I will say Houston plus 3, pretty good. Probably the most unlikely and probably the best odds of the weekend. Then kind of looking at the shot, really the name of the story after last week's performance was the Spring King kind of coming into the Battlehawks. And ultimately, the Battlehawks are really shaping up to be one of the better teams in the league. And once we see more consistent play out of quarterback, Louise gets more adept under center with this offense. Start to see them really start to look like a championship team, especially if DC starts to not do so good. Expect those questions to rise. Looking at her passing yards, and really, I think the passing yards will kind of define the MVP race. You know, Reed's going to be in there. Not that the team's been doing good, but he's been passing the ball damn well. Looking at Plummer, really, I think has one of the Tamu and Plummer, I think, have the strongest case for MVP. McClendon is also in there, but the team's not been great, and he's not been great either. Then looking at our yards for rushing, Jarvion leading the way so far. So he's been one of the better rushing or running backs in the league, but ultimately, you know, that offense has not been complementary to his attack, and ultimately his numbers should be higher. The fact that through Week 7 we're only at 355 yards. Then we got Deion Jackson at 332. Not great either. He really kind of has fallen off the last few weeks. John Lovett, we'd like to see kind of make a resurgence. Marcus Yarns, of course, we've had some good performances out of all these bottom backs, but they've been very inconsistent. which is something we're starting to see across the league. Then we look at touchdown. Dion, of course, is more of a goal line back anyway. But Merriweather, look at him up here with 4. Wheeler got that all in one game. So, I don't know that we'll see a running back make a push on it on the MVP rankings, but ultimately, there is. Uh, ultimately there is something to look ahead to. Then we look at our receptions, 38 for Mickens, been a good performance. Martin really doing well as with 35, Vaughn with 35 as well. Pretty good performance. Then looking at our players of the week, Mosley, really good performance out of Jordan Mosley. 7 total tackles, 4 solo, half a sack, 1 interception. Really good performance. And I think if you're the Battlehawks, your defense has been the strong suit all season. You should be excited. What do we got here? Question about Day Day. We'll get to Day Day in a minute. He has been the number 1 back, though. But looking at our defensive player of the week, Jordan really, really done well. Then we've got Elijah Badger, wide receiver out of the Storm, 4 receptions, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns. As I said, this is Plummer's safety blanket. The reason he is not getting clobbered every single week is because he can rely on Badger to bail him out anytime he needs. Then when we look at our special teams player of the week, we got a punter again, Kobe Wadman for the Stallions. 5 punts, 267 yards, 63.4 yard average. Really some of the good talent. And these specialists are the ones that make it to the NFL. So don't be surprised if Colby makes himself a case to go to the league off this performance. Really, really good performance out of all these players. And to look at our chat, we've got a question about Day Day. Day Day Hunter, our primary running back for Dallas, and they've really done well, or they had done well the last few weeks. And so far, he's not been great. Might make a case for Offensive Player of the Week one of these weeks if he can string together a game where he gets more than 50 yards. But so far, that's not been the case. However, Colby, though, definitely a fan favorite. It's really, really good performance. And, Coach McCarron has not had too many game balls to give out. So when it comes to your special teams player of the week, there is something to be excited about there. Looking at our viewership, it remains pretty consistent. We're sitting about that 630,000 to 650,000 range. And so far, really a good performance out of the league. And on some of our back-to-back double headers on ABC, we're averaging about 1.2 million. So pretty good performance. And I think there's been a lot of optimism because right now, the league is really doing better than professional hockey, which is kind of an exciting fact because not often are you seeing our games, competing with other established spring sports, let's say. But then when we look at our attendance, that's where the questions really arise. And there is some alarm to the league, because it's been a consistent downward slope since week 1, which is never something good and not what you want to see, especially if you're the owner and you got to think Repol's got to have some alarm there as he's looking at how these numbers are coming in. DC, what used to be one of the stronger markets, is consistently, fallen, but we're sitting about that 7,000 base. The Stallions, though, they used to be about 2,000, so they're still doing better than they were last year. But we did have 18,000 fans there for the home opener, and I know they were kind of not great in the beginning, but Week 7, 4,000, kind of disappointing, but not the only ones to do it. So you're also seeing that with Houston and these stadiums, they're kind of looking empty. But at the same time, there is hope there because if they can pack it out once or twice, they're doing all right. Louisville really been a strong fan base so far this year. So one of the more optimistic locations for me. 10,000 last week, so pretty good. Then when we look at the Battlehawks, and I do think 18,000, little disappointing for them. They honored the greatest show on turf. And unfortunately, not the greatest performance. We'd like to see them closer to that 30,000. And as the team really starts to do better, like they have been, expect them to really, strengthen up, let's say, as it continues. But now, time to look at our power rankings from across the league. So, our official power rankings, surprisingly, DC did not move from the top spot. And I was surprised, off a loss, you'd think they'd really um, you know, fall at least one spot, especially with the other teams getting to that 5 win level. That being the Battlehawks and the Storm. But I do think your top three probably is looking about right. Storm maybe could be a little bit worse. But our next group of three, the Stallions, Louisville Kings, and Dallas Renegades at that 3 and 4 kind of tied status, really, really a lot of competition is going to be happening here over the next few weeks, especially if these three teams lose, and let's say one of the Aviators or the Gamblers get a win. Maybe we see four teams all in that race for that four spot to go into the playoffs. But overall, pretty good performance, and a lot to look forward to if you're one of these teams. Because if you're a Stallions fan, you're hoping for the playoffs. You're a Kings fan, you're hoping for the playoffs. You're a Renegades fan, you lost 4 in a row, so you're hoping for a win at this point. But if you win, you got a chance at the playoffs. So there is that chance for you, of course. But then when we look at RJ's, our classic Fox reporter, he's got the Battlehawks in the number 1 spot, which is what I thought is probably where most of the power rankings would have had DC moving kind of to that 3 spot. And I do think that is agreeable off the loss to the Kings because they've been a sloppy team this year. And unfortunately, they were able to take down DC and take down the champs. So tough for them, but great for St. Louis. And their team is looking up. Orlando sitting in that 2 spot, haven't really moved. But there are questions for Orlando, if their offense isn't as prolific as it should be. Then when we look at DC, 3 spot, they were kind of my team, not exactly my team. Big fan of all the teams, let's say. Louisville, though, is I appreciate this as a new team. Really, I appreciate the fan base, and I appreciate the city, and I appreciate the team. And having them in the 4 spot is, I think, the most justifiable placement. I think the Stallions above them, I think, is incorrect right now. I would have Louisville in the playoff hunt right now. And with Birmingham, they could get another win. Don't get me wrong, but their offense is looking a little weak, and really it's more a testament of how Louisville's looked. You got consistent quarterback play so far, and really been looking good. Then we have Dallas. As I said, you lost 4 weeks in a row. You're hoping for a win, and if you win, you might get a chance at the playoffs. But as it stands right now, the team is collapsing. 4 weeks in a row, you've fallen from number 1 all the way now down to the 6th placement in the league. So kind of disappointing if you're a Dallas fan, but Houston, though, I would even have above Dallas at this point. Off that performance last week, 400 yards, that's more than you almost had the whole season. So really good, and I think there's a lot to look forward to if you are Houston. Then when we look at Columbus, I think it's justified to have them in the last spot. I know that the Gamblers were in the bottom spot on the official rankings, but the thing is, the Aviators have looked worse, and they've been a less prolific offense. And while I do love McClendon, it is unfortunate, especially, they did get the Michigan Panthers roster, but unfortunately, the championship or, runner-up status that they had last year did not transfer to Columbus, but I do think that is a result of the coaching. And, RJ really has had some good movement on his list, but so far there's some questions. Next, I wanted to look at a new one and bring you a new one this week. This is the grueling truth. So compliment of James Ernst. We're going to look at his rankings. He's got the Gamblers in the 8 spot. As I said, I kind of agree more with RJ's having them in the 7, especially off that performance last week. Then looking at the Aviators in the 7, probably should be in the 8, but I get it. The 6th spot for the Renegades, I do agree with that, and that is kind of where they are on all these lists, so probably the best placement for them, and really where I think the discrepancy is this 4 and 5 spot. That 4 and 5 spot, depending on who they play, I really I wouldn't want to play as he says here, I wouldn't want to play the Stallions, but there are questions that do need to be answered. So I think the Kings probably are more justifiably a playoff team. They do have that kind of shock effect, but AJ McCarron in the playoffs, is not something anyone wants to see. And really, I think this is a good idea of what our playoffs will look like, depending on, of course, there'll be that movement at the 4 spot, but these top 3 are pretty much guaranteed to get in. Defenders really shell shocked, could not believe they lost to the Kings. I think they got a little complacent. Storm need to clean it up. Battlehawks, I think it's really, they might be the best team in the league. And I think really where the official rankings got it wrong is having DC in that 1 spot. I think there should have been movement there, but there wasn't. But let's turn ahead and look at kind of where I've had them the last few weeks. Of course, we got tiers looking at who is reigning supreme in week 2. That was the Renegades. That is not the case anymore. Then our week 4 look, we had DC up there. And of course, they remained in week 6, but then we had a good solid line at our balling teams, but I think there will be some movement when we look after week 8. But let's look ahead at the week ahead that we have. So Friday night football kicking off 8 o'clock tonight. We've got the Orlando Storm traveling to Dallas, take on the Renegades. Really, this is going to define the playoffs. If the Storm don't win this game, there's going to be movement in the top 3 placements of the league. If the Renegades win, expect them to make a push for the playoffs. If they lose, they're pretty much out of the playoffs for the season. Then when we look at our Saturday starter, DC wants revenge. They put up their worst performance of the season against the Kings, and while it is a home game in Louisville, expect the DC to really show out. And if the Kings can get another win, I'd be very, very surprised. And if they do, they really deserve that 4th spot in the playoffs. But maybe DC is just having a bit of a collapse themselves. Then in our Saturday seconds, we'll have a rematch of an earlier game this season where the Renegade or the Gamblers took on the Battlehawks. And where I think this will be good is I want to see what's going to come out of the Spring King for the Battlehawks. But with the Gamblers, the questions remain. If they can put on a performance like that and they can take out pretty much the leader of the league going into week 8, expect some movement in the power rankings, because the Gamblers, by, just their talent, have a chance to make a competitive playoff run, but so far they've not been able to put it together. And then our Sunday showdown, our last game of the week, we'll have the Aviators traveling to Birmingham to visit the Stallions, and I'm really excited to see what Aviators team shows up, because so far this season they've been pretty poor. And I'd like to see more come out of them. And just kind of a roundup of our chat, we've got Dallas getting trashed a little bit. They do not have trading cards of UFL players yet. And would I buy them? Maybe not, but I might, depending if Panini was my partner. But we'll see. So all in all, week 8 is really where I think we start to see the playoff take shape. So we'll look at kind of how to watch and some of our storylines. So going in, as I said, our Friday night football game, that's going to be Orlando visiting Dallas with the Renegades. The Renegades, 4-game losing streak, really looking to break that streak. But Orlando's looked good this season, and especially after last week, they very well could win. And it seems they're playing in Fort Hood, Texas, which is not in Dallas or in Arlington. So looking at our key players, it's really going to come down to the quarterback performance of Jack Plummer and of Elijah Badger. I said he is the safety blanket, so depending on how that relationship goes in this game, expect that to define the offense. The same for the Renegades, Austin Reed, Tyler Vaughns. That's his safety blanket. If they do not have a lot of receptions, expect the Renegades to lose. So, with that said, really it's going to be a quarterback matchup. The defenses, I think, are pretty consistently matched. They're not great. You can score points on both these teams, but so far it remains to be seen exactly what the future holds for both of them. Then looking at our Saturday starter, our DC Defenders visiting the Kings, a rematch of last week. Depending on how Tamu does, expect the game to go that way. Because if he's throwing interceptions, they're going to lose. But if he's not, and he throws 400 yards again, expect 40 points. So I'd take the over on this game. I'll tell you that much. Because if not, expect the Kings to put up 30 like they did last week. And Chandler Rogers really has been the impressive talent to arise so far of this mid-season 3 to 4 weeks. Really was the backup. Nobody knew him behind Bean. They shipped Bean out of town. Rogers steps up. They've gotten some wins. They're making a push to the playoffs. So clearly, Coach Redmond did make the right decision here. Though, if you're a Defenders fan, I know I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. After their first loss, they went on a 5-win streak. So after this loss, don't expect them to not bounce back and go on another win streak going into the playoffs and really, really have a strong performance. And then looking at the Kings, did bounce. They really bounced back last week. So if they can keep that up, they'll make a strong case for their spot in the playoffs. But so far, they've been sitting on the outside. And this Houston Gamblers at St. Louis Battlehawks, I think will be a very, very competitive match, especially off of how Houston played last week. And if they lose, they are out of the playoffs. And they do not want to have that with 2 weeks left to play. But if Battlehawks win, probably in the playoffs. So expect the Gamblers to really put on a strong fight, and it's really going to come down to Deckers. He really is that number one quarterback. He knows the offense. He's the leader of the team, and he for a while there was making a strong case to be the best quarterback in the league. Not been the case lately, but there is hope, of course. And with the Battlehawks, Luis Perez kind of coming in, it is his second week, so expect him to really start to get more comfortable in the offense, be more prolific in his passing attack. I think there's a lot to look forward to there. And then Jarvion leading the league in rushing. We'll see what comes out this week, but he has been kind of their more consistent offensive weapon this season, especially through all the quarterback changeover. And then looking at the Gamblers, really could have won the game last week. They'll be looking to get a win this week. They do have a backup quarterback now that is got some talent in John Reese Plumlee. We don't know how much he'll play, but ultimately I expect the Gamblers to come in this game fighting for their lives because their playoff lives ride on their performance of this week. And then when it looks at St. Louis, they looked dominant last week. They'll probably look dominant this week. I really am looking to see how the quarterback performance is. The rushing attack has been good. I expect them to strengthen that against the Gamblers, but their defense is good, so maybe they'll put up a fight. Then our final game of the week, the Aviators taking on the Stallions. That'll be Sunday, 1 p.m., pretty consistent time, and I wish the UFL would just lock in Sunday and play it Sunday at 1 p.m. and at 4 p.m. every single week. I get it, scheduling is an issue, but this is football's time. Sunday at 1 p.m. That's when people want to watch football, and I wish they could stick to that in spring football. So far they haven't, but maybe in the future. And it's going to come down, this game really will come down to McClendon's performance for the Aviators, because if he's playing sloppy, expect the offense to be sloppy. Then when it comes to the Stallions, DTR, he's really that offense now. Justin Ross could have a performance, but it'll be a little bit of a quarterback matchup, but it really will come down to the defense and how they adjust against these quarterbacks. Because if McClendon can be stopped and DTR can be stopped, expect this to be a low-scoring game. But if the one defense can stop one and the other can't stop the other, I don't know how well it'll go. Then, looking at kind of what we should know about the game, Columbus really are looking for a win. They lose, they're out of the playoffs. They win, they might have a chance, but so far, their season's been pretty grim, and it's kind of a result of coaching. Birmingham fighting for that playoff race, and they need a win this week. Expect DTR to really be competitive. Expect Coach McCarron to come out, have some plays dialed up, and I expect it to be a good week. But our Friday night football, our Dallas hosting our Storm, it'll be really definitive for this playoff race, because if the Storm lose, they might have a little bit of a late season collapse. If the Renegades continue to lose, expect them to do just that and have a tough week. But it'll be on Fox, 8 p.m. kickoff, so we're heading up to that, about 15 minutes away. I think there's a lot to look forward to, of course, if you are a fan of both these teams, because depending on how your team performs, you'll know exactly how the playoffs are going to be. And depending on what this week has in store, expect to all of these games to have some impact on the playoff races. I expect the Storm, Defenders, and Battlehawks, if they win, guaranteed a playoff spot. If they lose, expect movement in the rankings, because there is a lot of movement that could happen if any of these teams go on a win streak these last few weeks. Looking ahead at kind of our DraftKings preview, get a look at some of these lines. So Orlando at Dallas. Dallas given 1.5. Now that's where I think it's most surprising. I know they're on a 4-game losing streak, and Orlando doesn't play well on the road. But to favor them, I can't get behind that. We'll see what the best bet is. I bet it's Orlando. Oh, wow. It's the Renegades covering the line. And honestly, maybe they have a good performance. Reed is, he looked outstanding. He's not been good lately. So, this pick really does ride on him kind of leading with a good performance, which may not happen. Whereas Plummer, you can expect to put up that number 2 performance, to be consistent, to have his safety blanket, Elijah Badger. Then looking at the Defenders of the Kings, Kings are getting 6. That's probably a good line for them. Defenders are still doing pretty good for the championship, plus 110, and I do think that is what you could expect, but it really will depend on how Tamu does. But I think off of that performance last week, expect them to come back with a fury, and I think this best bet, probably the one you should take. I expect Defenders, if they get ahead, expect them to run up the score, because Defenders football is to go up 30 on you. Then looking at the Gamblers at Battlehawks, this 7.5 line I think is way too close. I think this game is going to be much more like last week than it was their first matchup, where they won by 20. The Battlehawks, I get it, though, that home field advantage, the Battle Dome, the dome at America Center there in St. Louis, that is the best home field advantage. That is the 12th man in this league. So it does have an impact, especially when you're traveling here and you have only 2 wins and you're fighting for your playoff lives. The hopes of your season all ride on your performance this week. And you're playing in one of the toughest environments. And they've got one of the better quarterbacks. Hakeem Butler is really making a case. He might be one of the MVP favorites as well. He's done very well off a few catches. But then looking at this best bet, you're a fool if you take that. 7.5, I do not, but I doubt it's even 5. I doubt it's even 5. I'm skeptical. This is Vegas right here trying to manipulate you. I'll tell you right now, this game will be probably closer than it looks right now. Then the Aviators at Stallions, 3.5. Not great line, but it will probably be a consistent matchup, because 2 weeks ago, Birmingham and Columbus, or Birmingham was below Columbus on the power ranking. So there could be some hope. DTR, though, has looked good as he's kind of taken the reins of the team. And the Aviators, they got a lot of questions. So the 3.5, probably what'll happen, it'll either be that or it'll be way closer. Or the Aviators might just win. So that could happen, though. There is a lot to look forward to for this week, of course. A lot to look forward to. So little look ahead at our playoff predictions. So looking at AMT Gridiron did bring us the news about the ownership of the Oklahoma City team and what could be the future of the league. Also had some playoff predictions: Defenders, Storms, Battlehawks, and Renegades. This was May 2nd, and I think the Renegades probably unlikely they take up that 4 spot, but I think those first 3 very likely. I do expect the Battlehawks and Defenders make it in. Storm, there remains questions. They lose, Renegades have a chance. But if that doesn't happen, expect these first 3 to really, have a strong case to make the playoffs. Because, these 3, they win, they're in. That's all they got to do. Any of these teams win, they are in. And when we look kind of ahead and also back, I wanted to turn now to some overreactions I had. So I did think that Louisville will claim the 4 spot. That's our first overreaction. I think that is not an overreaction. I think that's what happens. And I think they win, and they got a strong chance to join this list to be in. Although if they win, they'll have to take it from DC. So we'll see how that shakes out. Our next one, Storm late season collapse. Now that could happen. For Arlington to have a chance at the playoffs, it requires the Storm to collapse. So I'm not going to say that's an overreaction. How they've looked vulnerable. Vulnerability is not good late season, nor is it good going into the playoffs. So watch out for the Storm and how they look. Our next one is Houston might get relocated. That might happen. I won't lie to you, that might happen. I hope it does not because I think Houston's a good market. It's a bustling city, but it might happen. So that's not an overreaction. And then our final one is I think the defense is going to lead signing day, and I do not think we'll have too many offensive stars because we've had a lot of recurring talent across the league, and I think that is kind of a sign that they haven't made it in yet. But we'll see exactly what happens. And to kind of look back at who had the best week 7, especially how that impacts this upcoming playoff week, really is going to come down to Louisville had the best week because they have a chance now. And especially with this rematch, if they can replicate what they did last week, they can join this playoff hunt and really make a good case for making it in. But our worst of the week and someone we will not see in our playoff week or playoff chase is Houston. And that unfortunately will not occur. So if we continue looking at, kind of our playoff ahead and really more that postseason, I expect whatever teams do not make it, expect there to be quite a bit of poaching going on of the talent. And as it stands already, we're already talking about it on Yahoo Sports, looking at the Detroit Lions here. And, first one, Cam Gill, number 1 defensive edge in the league, leads the league in sacks, and I think any team, Lions or any team in the league, would be smart to give him a call because he has had an amazing performance. Keyshawn Banks also done well. Probably will get a few calls. Don't know that he's guaranteed to make an active roster as Cam is, but has had a very good performance. And then our interior defensive lineman, Devoncha Maxwell, really done well. But as you see with these 3 players, all defensive, exactly what you can expect. I really do think the defensive players are going to kind of lead the NFL signings. Then looking ahead at our Matty A money lines, we'll take a look at what we got ahead. And I do think this, our Friday night matchup, the Renegades, I like the chaos it could bring. However, I do think smart money takes the Storm. Looking at our Saturday starter, I think going with DC on this one's probably smart. They're going to come back like a bat out of nowhere. And then our Saturday seconds will be our Gamblers at the Battlehawks. That'll be a good game. I probably would take the Gamblers. I know that's a good line for them. But more than likely, it should be a good performance out of them. And Vegas is a favorite on them heavy. So you got to think the money's really coming in on the Battlehawks. But clearly it's not if the line's that large. So maybe there hasn't been that adjustment, and maybe that's something we'll see this week. Then looking at our Sunday showdown, our final game of week 8, Aviators at the Stallions. I really like the Aviators here. I think that's the smart choice. They're fighting for their playoff hopes as well, and the Stallions, they're fighting for their playoff hopes. So kind of a tough matchup, but the Aviators, they're due for a good win. Now, if we do a little look around at kind of some of the other lines for the week, not just the money lines, we'll look. So our Friday night football, our spread is 3. Dallas given 3. I don't know that you take Dallas. I think you might want to take the Storm here because it'll probably be closer than 3, even if Dallas ends up taking the win. Over under, we're sitting at 45.5. I'd probably take the over here. I think it'll be a high scoring game. Generally, these Friday night football games are. And then looking at our Saturday starter, DC Defenders, spreads 5.5. DC's given 5.5. Probably take DC at 5.5. Then our over-under sitting at 45.5 as well. Seems all of the games are sitting at 45.5. Thank you, DraftKings. So probably take the over here. DC alone could put up 45. Then looking at our Saturday seconds, that'll be the Gamblers versus the Battlehawks. Gamblers are getting 7.5. Probably going to be closer than that, so I'd probably take the Gamblers here. Over under, I think it could be under, so I'd probably take the under on 45.5 as well. And then looking at Sunday, we've got the Aviators about 45.5 as well. For the total, probably going to take the under there, with the spread being 2.5. I'd take Columbus getting 2.5 as well. Then if we can look in, let's take a look at some of our touchdown scores. Who's got our best odds? Merriweather with plus 100. Probably a good bet there. Vaughn's plus 110. He did not have any catches, or he had one catch last week. I'm not taking that. Corbin at plus 120. That's probably a smart one. Badger plus 135, probably a smart one as well, but they'll have some defensive presence on him as well. And then Austin Reed at plus 225, I like that. I might take that. A good choice, I'd say. Looking at our passing line for yards, we got both sitting at 275. Both could hit the over here, but I think both will hit the under on 275 for Plummer and Reed. Then looking at receiving, we got Vaughn's and Hamler sitting at 100. Probably neither will hit either, so I'm taking the under on both of those. Rushing, what do we have? Corbin at 80, Day at 80 as well. Day probably not going to get 80, unfortunately, so I'd take the under there. Then with Corbin, another 80 line. Corbin could get 80, but I think it's unlikely. So if we look back then at our Saturday starter, this is where I think we'll start to see some big lines. Yeah, Dion's given 155. Probably going to happen with Dion. That's smart to take that because they're going to be putting up points. Cornell plus 120, probably taking that as well. Then we've got Ian Wheeler at plus 135. Probably going to get a few more scores this week. He's been quiet since his 4-tud performance earlier this season. I'd take that line as well. Looking at our passing props, our yards are sitting at 250 for Chandler Rogers. I do not think that he's going to put up a performance like he did last week, so I'm taking the under on Rodgers. And then Tamu sitting at 275, more than likely will hit that. He threw for 400 yards last week. So, could happen. And then our receiving, Tariq Black for 75, probably could happen if there's a good performance, but I don't think that's going to happen for the Kings, so I'd take the under here. Powell for 100. Probably going to take the under. I don't know that Powell will get that many yards, especially off of how well he did last week and how he's been so prolific this year. And then looking at our rushing, we got Dion for 80. I'd probably take the over there. More than likely, he'll get close to it. He may not, so maybe 60 is a better line for some of you. And then looking at Robinson at 80, take the under there because I can tell you right now, he's not going to get that many yards. Then we look at our Saturday seconds, the Gamblers at the Battlehawks. We've got Jarvion, the heavy favorite. I probably wouldn't take that. Hakeem, though, I would at 115. And then Moreno Cropper, kind of the new star on the Gamblers for plus 130, I think is a smart one as well. Probably the only ones I'd take, to be honest with you. Looking at our passing yards, we've got Perez at 275. They have none for the Gamblers because they have no idea who's going to throw the pass. Just like every single week before, you don't know who's playing quarterback for the Gamblers. And then Perez at 275, probably going to take the under there. He's still learning the offense. Cropper for 75 could happen depending on the performance. They're probably going to do all right, so I'd probably take the over here. Butler at 100, I'd take the under there. It'll probably be less, but he could very well go for 200. Then we got the rush yards. Jalen White, 80 yards, probably going to take the over here. Probably going to take the under, actually. And then Jarvion for 80, also going to take the under. I feel like it'll be a pass-heavy attack for them. And then wrap up with our Sunday showdown. Our favorite for a tud is going to be Tyrion Davis Price. Don't know that I'm taking that. Mickens, though, at plus 110. Probably I like that. DTR at plus 145. I'd take that for sure. McFarland at plus 145. I'm staying away from that. McClendon at plus 175. I like that. That's a good line. Probably take that because he is the whole offense runs on him. Pass yards, DTR at 300, take the under. He's not throwing for 300. McClendon at 250. Could happen, but I'm taking the under. It's unlikely he throws for that because odds are is the defense will be swarming him like they have every single week. Then we've got Tay Martin going on. Then we've got Tay Martin, which is taken over at 100 yards. I think you got to take the under there. That's a big line for him. And then with Mickens as well at 100, got to take the under there. Then when we look at the rush yards, we've got Lovett at 80. Could happen, but I'm probably taking the under. And then Davis Price at 80 as well, taking the under there. I think it'll be pass heavy if there is much offensive activity. Then I wanted to recap, just kind of look ahead at our final. I know we're right at kickoff, so we're going to look at Monday's headline today. So I think the most shocking headline is that only one headline or one team clinches this week, and we only have one team guaranteed a playoff spot going into week 9. Then we've got Houston. I think will be eliminated, and I think that will be the headline. First one to be eliminated. The Aviators may have a chance, but they also could be eliminated as well. So look for a lot of playoff movement coming ahead in week 8. Otherwise, it should be a great week of football. Thank you all for joining us. We'll take a look at the chat, see what activity we've got here. We demand the Panthers back. I hear you, brother. There's a lot of movement. I do believe once that Detroit FC football stadium is built, expect the Michigan Panthers to make a return. They've been a staple in spring football for a long time, and really it came down to the logistics of Ford Field and there not being anywhere to play in Detroit and them not wanting to move the team out of Detroit, and I understand why they wouldn't. We're getting some praise on for DraftKings, of course, give it up for them, as well as the Mattier money lines. You got to hail those. Regarding a Discord, do not have a Discord channel. Unfortunately, that may be something we look into in the future, but as I said earlier this season, we're really kind of figuring everything out at this point. But generally, we'll just kind of look ahead to what we have for week 8. Going to be a 8 o'clock kickoff. Kickoff is right now for the Storm and Renegades. We're going to have to turn it over and get into watching some of that. Kings and the Defenders really going to be a good game tomorrow. Our Saturday doubleheader is really going to be great. Expect 1 million viewership on both of these. Should be a lot going on here for the team. Then when we look at Sunday, should be a good game. Fox generally has a good performance. They always have a good broadcast. Our Friday night football has been kind of that premier package of the league this season. So really a great game this week. And I wonder if we click in, if we can see our play-by-play and what's going on exactly as we look ahead. But regardless, there's going to be a lot of good games, a lot to look forward to. So I do appreciate those that have joined us this week in the discussion. I do think there's a lot to look ahead to. Not exactly going to be watching. Can't get the play-by-play. How unfortunate. Probably have to get that from ESPN. Possibly. But all in all, I think we've got a lot to look ahead to for the league, especially. So far it's been a great performance out of the UFL, and I think for the fans of the league, you really have a lot to look forward to. The league has been strong so far. It's been, stronger spring football than we've ever seen, plain and simply. So really good performance, I would say, out of everybody. All in all, I expect a really, really good week for us ahead. It seems kickoff has not occurred yet. We still got some time there. Seems they're still getting everything set. But if there's nothing else, I just want to say thank you again for joining us this week. It's a pleasure to have you all and appreciate the discussion. We'll be looking ahead. The game will be kicking off right about now. Otherwise, I appreciate the time. Thank you for joining us in the discussion and have a wonderful week ahead. Enjoy our week 8 action of the UFL. Should be a great time for all involved. And ultimately, if we could find the play-by-play once it starts, which it might. We may have some hope there, but so far as it stands, looking like we're not going to be able to do that. But that is okay, because you can always watch it on Fox, as I said. That is our home for our... oh, we are live. The game is on. I do not need to watch it, unfortunately. I would prefer just to click in and get the play-by-play. And it seems we are not getting the play-by-play. Not getting it, not getting it. Got the odds. What do we have here? Let's see what we have. Possibly not getting the play-by-play. Need some color commentary here. Not seeing it, not seeing it, not seeing it. You know, we might not have any hope here. Let's see what the league's got to offer. Nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Okay. What about, let's check this out. Checking it out, checking it out, checking it out. Appreciate those that are still with us here. PWHL content. Oh yes, the Pistons are on tonight. Hopefully, Pistons can pull it out. It does remain to be seen, because a lot riding on that, especially with the Pistons kind of being number one in the league, or I guess in the seeded number one. You know, there's a lot riding on this game. Yes, so I understand NBA, there is a lot of competition for the UFL every single week, unfortunately. But, you know, there is always that chance for what we can find. So what do we have for our play-by-play? We have no information. Yes. But anyway, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you joining the discussion, and I hope you enjoy the Week 8 action ahead. Thanks again. Always appreciated, and thank you for the time this week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the Week 8 action, and have a wonderful